Hey, welcome. And as you can see, today we're talking about Stanley Kubrick's epic 1968 film, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And in particular, we're going to take a look at the food of this film that literally spans from the dawn of man to modern times and even in space, and what the meaning might be. And you might be surprised what we find in our analysis. Well, our first scene involving food is actually the 8 men in the Dawn of Man sequence, scratching around for plants or roots to eat. They arguably become food themselves at one point, as the beautiful leopard pounces on one of them, obviously looking for a meal. But after the monolith shows up to our 8 men, there is a change that occurs. Our main character, Moonwatcher, as he's known, realizes that a bone can be used as a tool, perhaps to crack open another bone to get to the marrow. Later, he'll realize he can also use it as a weapon. But this is really the point that our 8 men go from being vegetarians to being meat eaters, or at least it's implied. You can see it here. After Moonwatcher has figured out he can use the bone as a weapon, here he is with, presumably, his first meal of actual fresh meat, his first kill. And you can see here the whole group of 8 men now eating meat. The change happens quite quickly. From there, we go directly to our space station, and it's here that we'll see what food is like in space. Then we get to the space shuttle sequence where Dr. Floyd is going down to the moon to investigate something strange. And we see one of the crew members handing out these food trays. Of course, the food is looking, I guess, ultra modern and very processed. You can see here there are little pics featured on top of each item that show what it is, including corn, peas, and fish, all with a straw. Is it all liquefied? It's a bit odd. Also, there's a lot of time spent on these food tray scenes, and Stanley Kubrick was known to be a perfectionist who didn't put anything in his films unless there was a reason. So why so much time spent on food trays? What's the reason? Well, I think one of the reasons might be to show people eating alone, as opposed to with a family or group, as I think loneliness is an underlying theme in this film. Later, we see Floyd and his colleagues aboard the moon shuttle that's going to take them to where the monolith was unearthed. They actually unpack a meal here. It seems to be just sandwiches. Arguably, this food is a bit more home-style than the trays we saw in the previous scenes, though still very processed. One of the guys even says the chicken isn't really chicken, but it tastes the same. Also, I have to wonder where they're baking the bread on the moon. It seems a bit out of place. And finally, we get to the Jupiter mission with astronauts Dave Bowman and Frank Poole. And you can see we're back to these very futuristic looking trays, but it definitely doesn't look very satisfying. Frank doesn't even have a knife. He has a fork, a combination spoon and fork. Also notice that the food here doesn't have the colorful pictures on it showing what it is like those other trays did. But again, it's coming out of a machine, so it's showing us this is ultra-processed food. To be honest, as Dave is eating this, I can't even tell what it is. It just looks like some mashed up stuff and no longer resembles the original food that it was. Also odd that Dave is gazing at a video of himself while he eats. A lot of us nowadays also look at computer screens while we eat. Again, I think it enforces the theme of loneliness in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, there's also a shot of a birthday cake as astronaut Frank Poole has a video call, possibly pre-recorded, from his parents for his birthday. We see the birthday cake in the video, though no one eats it on camera, just a memory from home on Frank's birthday, and definitely not what Dave and Frank are eating on the ship. Then, finally, after Dave has gone through the Stargate and ended up in that room at the end, we see him sitting at a table in a well-furnished room. As far as the food goes, it does appear more natural than what Dave was eating before on the ship with Frank. The food on this plate appears a bit more natural, though I can't see exactly what it is, but I think that's a bread roll on the side and some salt or pepper. Also note there's real cutlery here instead of a fork. It could be whatever or whoever brought Dave here is trying to make him a bit comfortable with surroundings and food he might recognize. Again, he's still alone though, very much alone, since he is arguably no longer in the solar system. So, to sum up, for a film of such an epic scope as 2001: A Space Odyssey is, that spans from the dawn of man through to space travel, it's a bit unusual that so many scenes involve food. Stanley Kubrick was famous for being meticulous and a perfectionist. Some would say notorious for it. So all these food scenes can't be just throwaway filler. They are there for a reason. I think the first reason is to show the progression our food has made from the most natural raw food at the dawn of man to the ultra-processed sludge that Frank and Dave are eating on the Jupiter mission. It's a commentary, perhaps, that our food is too processed and doesn't even look like the original food item anymore. You can't even tell what Frank and Dave are eating. And the second point, I think, that underlies some of these food scenes is the theme of loneliness. While there are a couple scenes where people are eating together, most of the modern scenes show people eating off trays by themselves, and the food is ultra-processed, whether it's Haywood Floyd eating his tray alone on the space shuttle, or the astronauts Dave and Frank eating their sad-looking trays by themselves, staring at screens. This film has many scenes that seem a bit forlorn, empty, or lonely, and I think some of the food scenes also show this theme. Well, that's my new video about the food of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm definitely working on some new stuff for next week. Also, it is free to subscribe, so please hit that subscribe button if you can. It would help me. But either way, thank you for spending time with me, and have a great day.
Well, what do we got?
You name it.
What's that, chicken?
Something like that. Tastes the same.